Slepsky!
Hello and welcome back to Joe on Joe Extreme! It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and I am so happy to be back this week. We are still under lockdown and quarantine here, and we are crawling from the wreckage with episode 8 of G.I. Joe Extreme. Now, if you guys are wondering, well, what happened to episode 7? Because last week you played episode 6, which was Relics, and I'm going to say you're right. We're skipping episode 7 because some ne'er-do-well who sold me the bootleg G.I. Joe Extreme tapes CD at a Comic-Con 2 years ago, one of the files was corrupted. So, Joe Bros out there, I am putting out a call. If you have an easy way for me to see episode 7, which is Dawn's Oily Light, please reach out to me and let me know, because I can only see about 10 minutes of it in this file, and I've tried everything to get it to work. So we are doing episode 8 today, Crawling from the Wreckage, and I am so very, very, very happy to welcome to the show. He's calling in from Ohio. He's a listener. He's a new friend, and he sounds like a fascinating dude, and I can't wait to get into some of this stuff with him. His name is Ryan Kulik. Ryan, welcome to Joe on Joe.
Joe, this is the highlight of at least my quarantine, but the highlight of my 40-something years, I'll say.
That's a low bar, but I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Everyone's got to be the tallest furry every once in a while.
Well, let's say I got married and I have a kid, so that those two that go just below this.
Absolutely, so I love it, man. Well, you sound like you're a big Joe fan. Tell us a little about yourself. What do you do?
Well, I'm originally from St. Louis. Go Cardinals! I know you're originally from Chicago.
Well,
so
wait a minute. Hold on. Wait a minute. I don't mean to interrupt you off the bat, but yes, I am a Cub fan. I'm calling you on a Cub. There's the word Cub in your email address. I'm not putting that out there, but I was going to ask you: are you a Cubs fan or what's going on?
No. So it's funny. Yes, Ryan is my name. It's what I joke to people. That's my professional name. Most people know me by the name of Cubby, which has nothing to do with the Cubs. It's just some nickname I was given as a kid. I think they said I tried to call some lady Chubby, and I said Cubby, and now
that's funny.
I'm paying the price. But it's funny. Most people know me by that. So Cub 3M was Cub for the third millennium, because my first email address was some Yahoo account right around the year 2000, and I've just stuck with it forever. But
that's hilarious. And by the way, you lived a PSA. So Picture a little kid calling some woman chubby, and like barbecue comes up and is like, "Hey man, don't call her chubby, because someone's gonna nickname you Cubby, and it's gonna stick with you your whole life." That's what happened when I was naming some guy barbecue. Fast forward 20 years, and you're like, "Hey Cubby."
Oh yeah, and part of me feels like my father never really liked the name Ryan. I'm the second of 4 boys, so I don't think he's ever called me that. I barely remember him calling me that. And my wife, I've known her, 25 years. We've been married about 15 now. Hold on, I better get this right.
Yeah. She might be listening, literally in the other room. Yeah.
It'll be 14 years here, and I cannot honestly remember her calling me Ryan, so it's weird.
It's funny
for me to hear it. But yeah, growing up in St. Louis, having Cubby, everybody's like, "Oh, you're a Cubs fan." There's a few bruises I got for that. But,
I'll bet you. I mean, if I was walking around and my nickname was Cardinal,
yeah, right. I grew up there. My father worked for a military company. He was actually in the Navy. I don't really remember that as much, but he worked for McDonnell Douglas, now Boeing. So I was around like military hardware, stuff like that. And I went to college out there. And while I was in college, I worked in politics because my father's work and where I went to school was really close to the Missouri Capitol. I became a political consultant. Actually, for a brief period, I did work for a carnival company. So, I worked with clowns, and then I traded up for political clowns.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. So, an actual carnival company, like running carnivals, going from town to town, stealing children.
Easily. We had inflatable rides. And as a matter of fact, my very first day on the job was to go hire an Elvis impersonator.
Yes.
And I had a background. In college, I studied political science and theater. So I worked in the theater, but I'm 5'6". I'm never going to be a leading actor or anything like that. So I have more that kind of voice for radio type thing.
Yeah.
But so I moved into the management side. That's how I worked for this group. But yeah, I had clowns in my office. I would be the guy that paid them. So if they needed money, I'd have a clown in my office crying, saying I need money, and I'd be, well, Bobo, I don't know if I can pay you now.
Wait a minute. You're the villain in the movie Joker.
Oh yes.
You really are.
I sat there and when I watched that movie, I'm like, I know that guy. I know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the guy that ran that company, though, he knew I liked politics and moved me into. I did lobbying on like anti-gun legislation, things like that. I don't know if you were in Chicago at the time, but back in 2000, Missouri elected a dead man to the U.S. Senate.
Wow.
I wasn't.
Was he the Cardinals pitcher that died in Chicago from
No, it wasn't that. No, I remember that one too.
Yeah.
Really well. But I mean, so I started to work on these campaigns, and as time went on, I became a lobbyist, which is the type of thing you rub off of your feet when it's all, bad gum and stuff. It's not a career that people look at fondly.
It's not. I will say this though. Early on in my adult life, I had the pleasure of meeting, and his name's escaping me now, but we hung out a few times. He was a friend of a girlfriend of mine at the time, and he was a lobbyist. He was a longtime lobbyist, like big time DC, like that. He was older. That's what he did, and he opened my eyes a lot to the idea of lobbying, and to really what they do, and how much of the legwork they do to educate the politicians so that they make informed choices when it comes time to vote on this stuff. I think there's some overreach? Absolutely.
Yes.
But I do think there is a role for that. And I think there's just, not to get too political, I don't hide my stripes on the show, but I don't really like to get into it too much. But I think there's some oversight that could make all that work a lot better, but I'm not here to I wouldn't vilify you just because you said you did that, unless you were like lobbying for, terrible things.
Yeah. It's lobbying for, I don't know, the eco warriors or
that.
No, and I appreciate
I'm here representing Cesspool.
Oh, yes. Because I used to tell people, I worked a lot on chronic illness type things, multiple sclerosis being one of them. And, honestly, I would tell this to people all the time. If somebody has MS, they can't go to D.C. or they can't go here in Ohio, Columbus, or Springfield in Illinois, Sacramento, California, all that stuff. It's not easy for them. They have other things to worry about. So I speak for them, and I speak for their families, and I speak for this. And you try to put your thumb on the scale. But with that, especially after I got married and my wife and I had a kid, she didn't, controversial issues bring controversy. So I started to move more into advising smaller groups on policy decisions like cities, municipalities. And I do mostly now, I help people run for office, especially if they are running for the very first time.
That's great.
And I make sure, they don't. I have had a client go to federal prison for campaign finance. It wasn't my fault, but it's.
Wait, you were Tiger King?
No, I did watch Tiger King.
Because that's one of the things he got busted for, right?
Oh yeah, and the guy on there that was his campaign manager. That could have been me.
Wow, yeah.
So I try to get these new voices, is basically what I'm saying, into politics. And
that's so key. It's so key. Yeah. Politics wasn't supposed to be a lifetime career. It was supposed to be, you do something, you decide you want to pitch in, you do it for a little while, and you go on and move, you move the needle a little bit and you move on. You're not supposed to control the needle forever. And that goes for both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I will talk a little bit more about it, but I do a couple of other podcasts, and one of them I do with a former client of mine, and she was a former city council member here in the town I live in, and she's as Republican as Republican be, and I'm not, but we talk about local issues, and we find there's a lot we have in common.
Absolutely, and let's talk about that a little bit. So you do podcast production. You both have your own podcast called The Ex-Millennial Man. You do that with your brother, and you run is it a series of podcasts called Eye on Community, or tell me about that?
Yeah, Eye on Community is what I call micro podcasting, in that you just want to reach a small community of people. So with my partner in that business, we have a show called Eye on Loveland. The town I live in is called Loveland. And yes, I did crib that from The Simpsons, their Eye on Springfield.
Oh my gosh, you're right. That's great.
Yeah, I can't wait to one day to get a Springfield on our ledger, so I can say I have Springfield. But we do once a week. We talk about local politics. Town I live in is about 10,000 plus people. So we get a pretty good audience, around 1,500 that are just interested in Loveland politics. I mean, your listeners, unless you really care about Loveland, Ohio, there's no reason to listen to it. And where it's not a news show, it's an opinion show. We talk about what's going on with our school board and with the government, and we get a lot of people. Our tagline is be informed, be involved, and be influential. Mm-hmm. And we do a couple of other shows. We have one coming up called Backyard Politics, which is kind of like our version of Meet the Press down here in Southwest Ohio. And then we have one called High Heels in Politics, which is about a woman's point of view in the political field. And the woman who hosts that, I record and edit and produce her shows. She's 86 years old.
Wow. What is her name? What is her name?
Her name is Mary Ann Christie.
Mary Ann Christie. Shout out from Joe and Joe to you. I love it.
Oh no, she is great. She knows so many people in the state. Like, we're getting ready to interview our governor here, and she gets a lot of really big interviews. She did
Who's your governor again?
Our governor's Mike DeWine.
Mike DeWine. Yeah, you know what's funny? Yeah. So my wife, listeners, you guys know her as Toilet Teal, the Cobra cleaning lady. She's a frequent guest and contributor to Joe on Joe. She's from Ohio. She's from Dayton.
About 40 miles from me.
Yeah, she not only hates Mike DeWine, but apparently her now deceased, rest in peace, father, had a lifelong passion of hating Mike DeWine.
Yeah, I have. That's a whole nother podcast. I have a history as a lobbyist with Senator Mike DeWine.
Yeah, right. That's how they hate him.
Yep. Now, yeah, but she, Mary Ann, though, she knows all these people and gets them. As a matter of fact, some of your older listeners would probably know, is her cousin is a woman named Susie Chaffee, who was in the, I think, 1968 Olympics, and she was the face of chapstick in the 1970s and early 80s. She's called Susie Chapstick, and we did.
Oh, I remember Susie. I remember, the Susie Chapstick campaign.
Yeah. We did an interview with her, and it's been downloaded like 100,000 times. So I always tell people the hottest podcaster in the Cincinnati, Ohio area is an 86-year-old woman. So you can do this too.
That's so great, Ryan. I love it, man. Well, as the show goes, we're going to talk about your podcast, The Ex-Millennial Man. Today's file card features on the Scar villain, Wreckage. Wreckage was once a soldier in the Army, and after one mission, his status was MIA, but he was actually captured and subjected to horrible cybernetic experimentation, as you'll see revealed on this episode. So there's not much of a background to talk about Wreckage because he was one of the unproduced characters. So we're learning as much about him as we know, frankly, from the cartoon that we're watching as we go. He was scheduled to be a part of the second wave of G.I. Joe Extreme figures, which, were never made. He was pictured on the back of, I believe, the Black Dragon file card, along with Mayday and Rampage. I will say this, he's probably the most posed of all these figures. He's very wide. He's got his legs at a wide stance. His right arm is cybernetic and bionic and crazy, and he's got the one eye. He looks just like he does in the cartoon. Half man, half machine, 100% menace. Wreckage targets his blasting bio hand at the G.I. Joe Extreme front lines. And apparently, according to our friends, actually, this is according to the Joe Wikipedia page, there was a deluxe Wreckage figure that was also scheduled to come out, and that never got released as well. I like it. I love his origin story on the show, that he's like part Frankenstein, part super soldier program, and that it was manipulated, as you'll see later in this episode, not by the U.S. government, but by the Iron Claw. So cool. Wreckage, whatever your real name was. I don't think we learned it in this episode, and I don't know if we know it. Wreckage, we salute you. But let's talk G.I. Joe a little bit. So what's your history with it?
I'm well prepared because I've listened to a lot of your older episodes recently. That I know you have a lot of people early on who didn't know much about G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe was my thing. I mean, I liked it more than Star Wars. I never really played with Transformers. I never really played with He-Man. It was, again, maybe it's just because of my dad's work that, I mean, I had my Sky Striker. I had all the early figures. I read the comic book. It's the only comic book, as a matter of fact, I read. And I watched all of the early shows. I stopped. The movie was a bridge too far for me.
The animated?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cobra Law, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I was right. Maybe I was getting a little bit older too. But even while a lot of my friends were playing Dungeons and Dragons, I would play. There was another TSR game called Top Secret, and it was just us role playing GI Joe.
Oh, that's great.
And that's what we did. It's funny. I shout out to one of my friends, Tim. I'll never forget. He had a character named Raymond Zor, and he called him Razor. And I felt like it was something straight out of a GI Joe, like a Larry Hama file.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
how much we love it. Yeah. I know maybe like 15 years ago they did a GI Joe trading card game, but why did they never do a GI Joe role playing game?
Yeah, no idea.
So many characters.
Yeah, we ended up as we were older. There's another game. It was called Cyberpunk, but it was just in the future. I think it took place in.
Is that what
2019?
Well, yeah, there's a new video game coming out that's based on that.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
I think
it might be the same.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it's based on the same mythology. Yeah.
Yeah, we basically did the same thing. And even, I mean, this is how much I love G.I. Joe and how unoriginal I was. Now, I'm going to defend myself. I was in grade school and high school at the time. But my main bad guy was named Destron. And I mean, I just loved it so much. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, G.I. Joe was definitely my thing.
Oh, that's great. And do you still have, and I see over your shoulder, you got some, looks like, is that a flint? No,
so I think these are the 50th anniversary ones. Right. It's Cobra Commander and Shipwreck.
Oh, okay, the 25th anniversary ones. Yeah.
And it's as a matter of fact, my son and I are going to be doing videos with them. We're going to recreate like the scene from American Psycho where he chops up Jared Leto.
Whoa.
They get well played. And then I have my Kenner, jacked up Darth Vader too, because that's inspiration for me during quarantine. It's been like prison. I get up in the morning and I lift weights, and so he's my inspiration. I want to be big like the Kenner Darth Vader.
They were. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because that ties in with the G.I. Joe Extreme stuff, because G.I. Joe Extreme was quite buff, very much modeled in the same vein as the Kenner Star Wars stuff at the time. Had you seen G.I. Joe Extreme before?
No, never. It's weird to me because how much I loved G.I. Joe as a kid, I just completely forgot about it. And this all was on when I was in college.
Yeah,
and
me too.
In college, I watched Saved by the Bell was probably what I watched most of in college.
It's great.
Yeah, really I never really saw it. I kind of actually completely forgot about G.I. Joe until around, my son was born in 2010. And it was right around when, I can't remember the exact year, but Netflix first started streaming, and they had all the old Sunbow cartoons on.
Mm-hmm.
While he was really little, my wife she's the breadwinner in this family. So I was home with the baby. I would watch the old G.I. Joe cartoons again. I'm thinking, man, I love this. And then with my website and other podcast, I talk about it every now and then. And my brother is like, he doesn't care about G.I. Joe at all. And his eyes glaze over. So I told him I'm going to rank every episode. So over Christmas, I got all the Sunbow, all 95 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I discovered your podcast. I'm like, I got to find G.I. Joe stuff. And
oh, great.
I'm like, I'm going to rank them all. I mean, spoiler alert, I really want to put the Viper #1, but I know.
If you've heard my Viper episode, I'm way on board with that. I don't think it's better than Worlds Without End, but it is. Yeah. Viper is top 5, easily top 5.
Oh, yeah. Worlds Without End, no place like Springfield.
Yeah, as far as like sillier episodes go, Viper is absolutely the best. Absolutely
one of my favorites.
The best. I love it. I absolutely love the Viper so much. Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie? It's about not 2 movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben. And each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out one episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show. Well, today we are watching Crawling from the Wreckage, which is an origin story for Wreckage. Right? Like that's his name, Wreckage. And it's not a bad episode. It's also a retelling of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And so that's cool. And I like it. So far so good on these episodes. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. I've been following along, and this was the first episode I actually watched.
Yeah.
So I sat down. You sent it over yesterday, and I sat down and watched it, and it was weird. Immediately afterwards, I was going to YouTube trying to find other episodes, and it's unfortunately not very easy.
No, it's not, and that's why I'm having a hell of a time finding 7. So again, listeners, if you're out there and you like me, grabbed a bootleg of this, if you can rip that 7 and just email me, and also listeners in general, reach out to me at Joe on Joe Pod and Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Let me know if you want to be a guest on the show. That's exactly what Ryan did. And within a few days, we were up and running and recording, because I want to get Joe fans on for this extreme stuff, because it's a little different. It's stuff that I'm not super familiar with, etc. And Ryan, you're in luck, because I just sent you a link to my entire Google Drive that listeners, if you want to be a guest on the show, I can share that with you. So come on. Yeah, and you can
awesome.
and you can watch every episode of G.I. Joe Extreme that I've ripped, of course, except for 7, unless we get that rectified. And we will by the end of this run. We will, even if I have to. Well, no, I was just gonna say if I have to go to a con and buy another bootleg, but there's no cons.
No, I've never been to a con, and I thought to myself, oh, maybe now's the time to go since I'm getting really back into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, where the heck am I gonna go?
There's no cons. Oh my gosh.
Thank goodness for your show. It's like my con fix.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. Well, so we're going to get going with this episode, Ryan. And listeners, if you're ready with your episode, if you happen to be lucky enough to have a copy of it, episode 8, get ready to hit play on my mark. 1, 2, 3. So, speaking of copies of the videos, this version of it, typically it always had the prequel live action stuff. This one doesn't. So I don't know if they did do a live action one for this episode and this version just cut it off on the tape, or if they never did one. I have no idea of telling.
Yeah, when you sent it to me, I thought the same thing. I actually went to YouTube and they have all the live versions all together, so I was trying to figure out which one this would have been, but I couldn't figure it out.
So, you know what? I think I saw that video too when I was searching for episode 7, but I didn't watch it. Do you know, did they have like 26 live action ones on there?
No, it was, I think I counted as like 10. It was like 9 or 10.
Yeah. And maybe that's it. Maybe they only did so many. So we don't get that fun. I did see that on 7, it was a live action version of Black Dragon, and it looks crazy. So here we go, Crawling from the Wreckage, written by Len Wein. So Len Wein, he's a comic book legend. He created Wolverine. He wrote some fantastic Justice League books. He passed away just a couple years ago, but he's a legend, man. So Len Wein is solid. So I'm here for this.
It's funny you say it. I mean, listening to your show, because I wasn't in any other comics, but learning about comics and these writers and who they are, and it compared to the DIC stuff, it looked like they got some heavyweights on this one.
There really are heavyweights, yeah, and I think it shows. I do think it shows. We've said it multiple times that I think that these, for the most part, are pretty solid. Typically, the DIC stuff and this suffered a little bit from not as in depth as the Sunbow stuff. You know, like the Sunbow stuff always had like multiple plot threads going and some like character development movement. This is more about one singular plot that someone has to stop, you know, without a lot of the personal stuff. But having said that, this episode is personal for Wreckage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting. I like that you say that because, again, I did theater in college and all that stuff. That's why I think I like the Sunbow stuff still to this day, because you're right. These are real characters. They have, for a cartoon, especially at that time, I say my wife's the breadwinner in our family. I feel like I'm okay with that because Flint told me it's okay that Lady J is better than him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So I do think G.I. Joe programmed me. I mean, it did teach me not to jump over power lines or not to swim while there's lightning or something like that. It taught me a lot. Heck, I can tell you this, Joe. I know what DNA is. The first time I heard DNA is because of G.I. Joe. So it molded me. Yes.
Right? Yeah. You learned a lot from G.I. Joe. I learned from Larry Hama's comics. I learned words like enfilade.
Yeah.
And he would like, he knew that these would be hard words for kids to understand, or just literally words kids had never encountered before. So he would have someone in the comic explain what it is as like a piece of military history. And you're like, all right, I get that. That's cool.
Oh, I still tell people when I was in the theater, when we would put on costumes, I'd say we're going in mufti because
yes,
I learned that from G.I. Joe.
Yes, I've talked about that on this show. Yeah, that's and I think that's from issue 1 of G.I. Joe, right? When Stalker was disguised in that small town with the shootout with Roadblock, Snake Eyes, and Scarlet.
Right, that little extra comic they had.
Yeah, totally. So on the show, Rampage and Inferno were in the middle of some ongoing plot, and there was a satellite weapon had fallen out of the sky, and so now Ironclaw, I keep wanting to say Darkclaw, Ironclaw has dispatched Wreckage to go get that satellite, and now we're going to check in on the Joes, and it's going to be, so is this kind of a little bit like the plot of Satellite Down? I don't know if you remember that episode, but that's a classic.
As a matter of fact, when I saw this, I was thinking, are they just going to rehash this? Which they do not, to their credit.
No. It becomes Satellite Frankenstein.
Yes.
Yes.
But I love those kind of stories. I mean, it's look, not to give a weirdo 90s cartoon any deep literary credit, but it is a character-based thing. You're learning about this character and that everybody's not good or bad.
Totally. And real quick, what did we just see? There was just lightning flashing in the sky.
Mm-hmm. I didn't
like
think
that
about
is so Frankenstein. And I love that they do this on the show because this is a kid's show and kids probably weren't exposed to Frankenstein. You know what I mean? So like you're layering that onto these shows. I think it elevates the form. You know, when you read about, I've been watching a lot of Star Trek lately, and obviously in the movies, they started layering in all these Shakespearean references and stuff. But then you see some of the plots that they did on the old show, and it's a lot of the same thing where they're taking these established stories and kind of layering it into the Star Trek universe. And that's an introduction for people to those other broader universes. I think it totally works.
Yeah, and my wife, I keep talking about her. I feel like Borat, my wife.
Yeah, well, what's her name?
Oh, her name is Swapna. She's going to be like, she tells everybody Tina because it's hard. Her parents immigrated from India, so
wow.
She's an anchor baby. She's born here.
Oh, well, I love it. That's great. And so her parents live here now still?
Oh yeah. They've lived in the States longer than they lived ever in India. But she's a big Star Trek fan. And
great.
That's she's, as a matter of fact, I tell her she needs to put on her Twitter profile Jeopardy runner-up. She was on Jeopardy. Halloween of 2018 was her episode. Yeah.
Wow. Did she perform well? Did she do all right?
She led for about 10 seconds because she got Final Jeopardy right, and then the person that was ahead of her got it right too. So,
oh, wow. Do you remember what the question was?
I remember exactly what the question was because I was so excited that I knew. And look, I will never be on Jeopardy.
Or I'm sorry, what the answer was. What was the answer?
Yes, it was something like this. That episode was for Halloween, but they taped it back in August or something like that.
Okay.
So we knew it was going to be Halloween themed, and it was like 1960s movies, and it was this movie featured Playboy model so and so, a melon, and chocolate syrup. Or this famous scene.
What is the shower scene in Psycho?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was so proud of myself, but my wife's an engineer by trade, and she's a manager, but that's her education. And she was going up against the person that was leading. Her job was like Russian literature from the 1890s. I'm like, of course he's gonna know.
Of course. That's great, man. That's great, listeners. You guys know I'm no stranger to game shows. Since we've lived out here in California, we've been on Price is Right. I've been on recently. Last year, I was on a show with my wife. Actually, I don't know that wait a minute, because we weren't podcasting when we did this. I don't know that I talked about this on the podcast yet. I was on a game show last year with Joey Fatone as the host.
Oh.
Yeah, called, what was the name of the show? But my wife and I, and our friend Penny.
I think I know what you're talking about. It's on like Game Show Network. My son, that's what he wants to be when he grows up, is a game show host.
We were on like the 4th episode, and we won $10,000.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So what is it called? Anyway, Joey Fatone. Yeah, but so we were on that last year. We won a bunch of money. I was on an Oprah game show, won a bunch of money. Like, it was when we first moved out. It's funny, like every year or so, you're kind of eligible. So we just wait about a year, try to get on a game show and have fun with it. It's such a blast.
Yeah.
So we're getting a little bit of Wreckage's history here, and it is very Frankenstein. And they took a soldier, a U.S. soldier, by all appearances, and he goes under this very Weapon X-y surgery. And it's like they're turning him into the ultimate weapon for the military. So much like Frankenstein, he wakes up and he's part man, part machine. He's huge, and he's just a monster of a dude.
And I do love this scene with this supposed American general. It actually gave me chills when I saw it. When you see it's actually, I'm gonna say Darklon.
Oh yeah. Yep. It is. Yeah, it's actually Ironclaw. So Ironclaw made him, but he thinks it's the U.S. Army that made him.
Right.
So that makes him a tragic figure. And then here comes Ironclaw, and he rescues him. So then he becomes beholden to Ironclaw, which is so smart.
No, yeah, I do. This was a lot more intelligent than I expected, especially after DIC episode. The last few were like Metalhead and all that stuff. I just God bless you for getting through those.
Well, you take one episode at a time, and and I got to be honest, there is a reason why I took a hiatus in recording new episodes. After the DIC era, there was a bit of a burnout there. But these are refreshingly enjoyable. And I dig it. And look, if you look closely on him, they really do draw him. And I don't think I ever noticed it for this. He has like the Frankenstein stitching, Frankenstein scarring on him. So now in the Frankenstein story, he's now taken in by the old man with the little kid. And if you remember, was it Frankenstein? He meets the blind old man.
Right, and then there's the little kid by the lake.
And the little girl in the lake, I think is Bride of Frankenstein. One of them's from one, and one's from the other. Yeah. And of course, all beautifully parodied in Young Frankenstein.
Of course, that to me is Frankenstein.
Totally. I've been watching during this pandemic. I've been rewatching the Universal monsters too, and those Frankenstein movies, especially the James Whale ones, are so great. They're really just so brilliant, man. They're so well done and funny and just beautiful. So let's just hope this girl doesn't get thrown into a river to see if she floats like a flower.
Yeah, the whole time I was thinking that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been showing my son, because if it doesn't say Mario or Fortnite, I've tried to get him into G.I. Joe. He has no interest whatsoever. He's all about Mario and Fortnite right now. But we've been showing him all like movies from our youth, and we've shown him Ghostbusters and Back to the Future. We did Raiders of the Lost Ark last week.
Yes. What do you think about Raiders?
He actually loved it.
How old is he?
He's 10.
He's 10. Okay, that's great. It's a great age for it. Yeah, that is the age that's why we're doing this show right now. because I've said that so many times. When you were 10 years old, whatever you're into, that's really what sticks with you for probably most of your life, as some kind of like kernel of love. So that's the age to show them this good stuff.
No, and that's what we're trying to do. Is my Ex-Millennial Man podcast. My brother and I were separated by almost a decade, so our tastes are very different. And
he's young, and he's younger.
Yes, yeah. He's the baby of the family, one of 4 brothers. He's the baby, but he's and first off, I think he's the best basketball mind I've ever dealt with. I mean, he's got a good following when it comes to basketball.
Nice.
But like our newest episode, we just talked about Star Wars, and it's so weird to me how he and I see it so differently, and how he really likes the new movies a lot, and I'm one of these cranky old men that The Rise of Skywalker just didn't do it for me.
Oh, okay. So let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit. Might as well. Well, real quick though, Wreckage absolutely helped this town. He built like a dam, and he helped their irrigation and all that stuff, which is funny though, because when I did watch this, I was like, well, okay, but since he's not like a civil engineer, I'm assuming he just created some kind of floodplain further back up the river.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I get that he helped it, but he did find the satellite, though.
Yeah, he found the satellite.
He found the satellite.
Like, he's got to complete his mission to hurt the army.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and listeners, this version doesn't have commercial breaks cut. All the commercials are cut out of it as well. So we'll put our file card. You probably have heard it. I've probably put it up front already. I liked Rise of Skywalker for all the heavy lifting that it had to do. But I think they totally screwed up the final trilogy as a company.
I agree. Yeah, it's and that's kind of what we talked about, because he's like, look, it's enjoyable, man. You gotta get over yourself. You've gotta understand and just enjoy things. And that was kind of like what we talked about, is like, I don't know if I can do that anymore.
Yeah.
The example, and I've given this a million times on my show, is when I was a kid and I heard Leia tell Obi-Wan, "You fought with my father in the Clone Wars," I had like 20 years to think about what the Clone Wars were.
Right.
And then when I got Attack of the Clones, I'm like, that's not exactly what I thought. And
that's the thing. On film, we never saw the Clone Wars on film. Yeah. Like they saved it for the cartoon, and the cartoon, as we discussed, was great. But give me the movie.
Yes, I will say, and by the time this airs, I'm sure it will be done. I think one of the best Star Wars movies is playing on Disney Plus right now with these last 4 episodes of the Clone Wars. Yeah, it's amazing. It's incredibly good. So I feel like, okay, they finally gave it to us. But with the new sequel trilogy, and this is how I explained it: Force Awakens was fun. It was cool. Mm-hmm. And then The Last Jedi was deep and did some different things. And I do understand that it took a lot of what The Force Awakens did and threw it away. And then The Rise of Skywalker, I'm stealing this for somebody, but they said it's like a dungeon master, a first-time dungeon master just throwing a bunch of random quests at you.
Right.
And I go, well, to me, look, at least the prequels, say what you will about them, at least they told an original story. And that's, again, this is me being a cranky old Star Wars fan.
Mm-hmm. No, I hear you. And I got some friends who really, really love Last Jedi and really, really hate Rise. I thought Force was a needed palate cleanser because the only we had never had a sequel to Star Wars. We'd literally never had a sequel to Star Wars. We only had prequels. It was the first Disney one, and they had to set kind of put a marker in the sand and say, this is what our universe is going to be like. Here's a little bit of a greatest hits. And here's a bunch of mystery plot threads that we can explore in the next movie. Okay, great.
Yeah. And then they threw it all out.
And then the next movie And then the next movie comes along and it throws all of that away. And I'm like, okay, well, but now we're quote unquote at the end of a trilogy with no mysteries, nothing, you know what I mean? Like nothing. I don't even still understand, and this is a fault of all 3 movies, I still really don't understand the politics of Star Wars. Like, why were they rebels again? Like, someone explained it to me that it was explained in the extended universe stuff, and it sort of makes sense. But I'm sorry, it's not on the screen at all.
Yeah, I'm with that. And look, I'll watch the Clone Wars, I watch Rebels and all that stuff. It's but yeah, I want to see it on the screen.
Yeah.
I agree with
Speaking
you.
of seeing on screen, we're getting a great freight Wreckage fight right now. Two massive dudes just destroying this village while they fight each other.
I know it's one of those was a collateral damage type things.
Yeah.
That,
you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the end of Universal Soldier.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
They're fighting in the rain and the threshers.
Yeah.
So that's my feel on Star Wars, is that as a whole, I like Rian Johnson as a filmmaker. I don't think Last Jedi works well as a middle Star Wars movie in a trilogy at all.
Well, I will say my biggest concern was at the end of Jedi, they won. It's over. And then I just felt like, okay, they didn't win. It's all going again.
Right.
And it's and I know there's this idea of I do like some of the Luke questioning the ways of the Jedi, because I feel like the prequels didn't do as good of a job, but things like Clone Wars did a good job of showing, hey, the Jedi were not great.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And we're talking Star Wars during G.I. Joe here, but it's I like that, and I like that Luke had that type of thing, but honestly, he was a bit too cranky for me. And you're right, there were
and you never convinced me that the Luke that I know, the Luke that we all saw in the movies and the extended universe and all that stuff, when he knew that, even if he knew like, oh, he attacked or did or didn't attack his nephew, if he knew his nephew was running around the galaxy murdering people,
yeah, he would something.
He would not have stayed in hiding. Like, I get it. Maybe he goes into hiding for a little bit, but then at some point he knows that Kylo Ren's Kylo Ren. He's out of hiding immediately and after Kylo Ren. That's just a fact. Yeah,
and I told my brother on our show too, is when Luke fought Vader, there were stakes, and he didn't want to do it, and he was regretful, and it was tough, and it was hard, and he wanted to be better. Whereas Rise of Skywalker, and I think it was a kick butt scene, when Rey goes to fight Emperor Palpatine, she doesn't care. There's no stakes. She just wants to annihilate him.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. There was a lot of. I think it would. Frankly, even if they wanted to bring back Palpatine, I think it probably would have been stronger to make her a Kenobi.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah, would have been stronger. Just make her a Kenobi. Just say, and then tell that story in the Obi-Wan spinoff movie or spinoff TV show or whatever it is, that he met some lady and fell in love and blah blah blah. It would have been stronger, and and then I don't know. There was, and again, that is on, I think, the ownership of Star Wars, not necessarily Abrams or Rian Johnson.
No.
I think the one thing Lucas did right is he shepherded his property with such an iron grip that, obviously after having a sister make out with her brother, that at least there was a vision, there was a direction that it was going. And man, this trilogy just dropped the ball. But anyway, hey, G.I. Joe, guess what? Yeah. But that's the episode, guys. So it ends with Wreckage is the Joes allow Wreckage to go because he was a good guy, and he did the right thing in the end. And he made nice with the little girl and all that stuff. And it was great. It's a fun episode. It's a really, really fun episode. I know we talked more Star Wars.
No, I know. I feel bad. I mean, one of the things I love about your show is when you talk with people and you guys just get rolling. And sometimes I'm like, but what's going on in the episode?
Yeah. Well,
I missed out. I wanted to say when I first saw Wreckage, I was thinking to myself, oh, is this like future Major Blood? I mean, there were certain things like that. But
So going through this. Going through this, we now officially know, because we did the Sergeant Savage, and we know Sergeant Savage is a member of G.I. Joe. So, and Sergeant Savage, the cartoon, is tied to Real American Hero. So we know that this is the future of Real American Hero. You could easily have some of these people be the offspring or descendants, of Major Blood, or, Snake Eyes and Scarlet's kid or something like that. It's not too far-fetched. Well, Ryan, one thing we like to do, which we got caught up in Star Wars talk, is I love asking my guests if you could be a member of the Joe or Cobra team, or the G.I. Joe Extreme team, or the Scar team. Which would you be? What would your code name be, and what would your specialty be?
Well, I've thought of. I was like, oh, I've got a couple ideas here, and I thought at first off, it's all Cobra. I mean, Cobra Commander.
says the lobbyist.
Yeah, that's right. When you fight governments for a living, you tend to think, they're not so bad. But this is I haven't done this show yet, but sometimes we do lists, and I'm going to do my starting lineup for bad guys, and Cobra Commander's my cleanup hitter. So he is my guy. And my first thought was like my dream job, I'm in my mid 40s, but my dream job is to be chief of staff to the president.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, oh, maybe Cobra Commander needs a chief of staff, but I think he had somebody do something similar to that.
Maybe. Yeah, that sounds familiar, but there's always room for, what did the Jokers say? We always have.
Well, I know what Cobra's missing, though, and then no offense towards legends like Larry Hama or anybody on the Sunbow show, but it's everybody says the things you're not supposed to talk about is politics and religion. So I go, well, the Joes have the assistant chaplains like Francis and Bucky and whoever those guys are. They've got their chaplains. Cobra needs a chaplain.
Okay.
And I thought the best thing about it is it would be a mega preacher, like a Joel Osteen or weirdo guy like that. So I thought in my head, I go, you know what? I need to be the Cobra televangelist, and I'd call myself Brother Brimstone.
I love it.
And have my crimson suit and my Cobra 3-piece suit, Cobra tie. And, I am afflicted with the same hair you are, as I don't have any. So my character would have to have the big white slicked back hair. But that's what Cobra needs. They need, that's how you control the masses. Broca Beach and Cobra Island, they need their televangelists.
You are completely right. You are completely right. Now, would you be spreading the gospel of Cobra Law?
Oh, now you see, that's what I'd have to do. I even thought, and I know he just passed away, the guy who did all the artwork for the cards.
Hector Garrido,
Yeah. I even thought I'd have that explosion and I'd hold up, which again, you get all the religious people mad, but what looks like a Bible, and it would have a Cobra symbol on it.
Hell
the gospel according to Globulus or whatever.
That's amazing.
I told you, I thought about this. I
love it. Well, listen, Brother Brimstone, welcome to Joe on Joe.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's so great. That's so great. And listen, listeners, you're out there. You got to track down the X-Millennial Man. That is X, just the letter X, and the Millennial Man. And that's, I'm sure it's on iTunes and all that. Anywhere you get your podcast, right?
All over. And it's, we just talk about pop culture, sports. I occasionally will do something about politics. But they're hour-long episodes every Saturday, and we just we've debated Marvel versus DC. We've talked about the best Batmans ever, and our newest one is he and I arguing about Star Wars.
Oh well, I'm gonna give it a listen. Listeners, you need to give it a listen, and you guys all need to reach out and thank Ryan Kulik for being a fabulous guest here on Joe on Joe Extreme.
Oh, way extreme. I was having my Mountain Dew the whole time.
Yeah.
Like skateboarding.
I like to mix my Mountain Dew with my Red Bull to get the most extreme.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's too much for me. I don't know.
Ryan, thank you so much for being a guest on Joe and Joe. This has really been delightful, my friend.
No, thank you, Joe. And I can talk a lot, so I appreciate you letting me talk about my love of Joe and all things G.I. Joe.
Oh, no, man. That is what this show is here for. You're welcome back anytime. Ryan Kulik, thank you so much. And now you Joe. And Joeing is half the battle.